How we doing today, planet Earth? My name is Ian Fox, and recently, after both playing and reviewing Fallout 4 and all of its DLCs, I just felt the need to dive headfirst back into this Fallout rabbit hole yet again, because I felt that I just needed to play some Fallout 3. For me, Fallout 3 was my first Bethesda game, and if you ask me, I think that Fallout 3 is the best Bethesda-developed Fallout game by far. Not only that, but I strongly consider Fallout 3 to be one of the best games in the franchise overall, and a huge reason as to why I feel that way has to do with the game's incredibly unique setting and atmosphere. The game is set in the heart of the United States, aka the ruins of Washington, D.C., 200 years after the Great War and the nuclear annihilation of humanity. In the Fallout universe, this part of the world is referred to as the Capital Wasteland, and something that I don't ever hear people bring up is that it's not referred to as the Capital Wasteland just because it's set in the capital of the US. Of course, the name does fit the setting, but what I love the most about the name is that it has an incredibly dark secondary meaning. If we take a look at simulations online in our real world of potential targets in the US if a nuclear war were to occur, as you'd expect, the US wouldn't fare too well. But out of any target on the map, Washington, D.C., in every simulation you look at, always gets the worst of it.
Fuck! Hey, Lieutenant, one hell of a boom. Get back.
Fallout 3 represents this incredibly well, as the Capital Wasteland is not just the capital, but also the wasteland of wastelands. It only takes a very short amount of time exploring the ruins of what was once the beating heart of a great nation to understand that this place and the people who are surviving here, for lack of a better term, are pretty fucked. Even 200 years after the bombs dropped, Washington, D.C. lacks any sort of actual civilization, aside from a few pockets of survivors that have managed to carve out some sort of life for themselves in small settlements here and there. Largely, the biggest reason for this is due to the lack of clean drinking water. Such a large concentration of nukes in a single area has left the nation's iconic monuments in ruins, and the entire Capital Wasteland is still irradiated to an astonishingly fatal degree. If you travel around the entire map, you will not find a single body of water that hasn't been rendered completely undrinkable from the aftermath of the war. Not only that, but the radiation itself has forced many species of animals and even humans to mutate into bloodthirsty killing machines. This land is so hostile that it is also infested with ruthless raider gangs that won't hesitate for a second to try to kill you and take what you've got for themselves. When you take a moment to think about it, it makes it really easy to understand why this land is still mostly uninhabited and why the average person here has to struggle so much in day-to-day life simply to stay alive. Bethesda did a fantastic job of simulating Washington, D.C. as the Capital Wasteland and making it feel like a highly oppressive world with a dark and gritty tone. Oppressive is the word I've been using when it comes to the settings and atmospheres of various Fallout games, because all the while this franchise is known for sprinkling in some comedy here and there, it is very important that the tone still feels oppressive, and one of the ways that Bethesda succeeded in this is with the art style. One thing that quickly becomes apparent when you're exploring the map is that for the most part, it lacks any sort of color that is easy on the eyes. For a very large majority of the time, you're going to be looking at a lot of brown, a lot of gray, and the world has a sort of green filter slapped on top of everything. I'm sure this is in part due to the game coming out in 2008, a time where developers were slapping piss filters on top of every game in development, but I happen to really enjoy how dull the game looks in its presentation. When I think of what a nuclear wasteland would be like, Fallout 3's world is immediately what comes to mind, because this land is dead. The trees are burned to a crisp. The grass that once covered the area is now nothing more than charred dirt and dead shrubs, and just like the millions of lives that once existed here, any color that was on damn near everything around you has long been burnt away. That's not to say there isn't any color at all though, because what's great about having a wasteland that looks as dead as DC is that when you do see some color, it pops out at you and stands out from the dullness surrounding it. In a way, it makes exploring the wastes a bit more entertaining as you get filled with intrigue when something you've seen in the distance catches your eye. Despite how desolate this landscape is, it does have its moments where it's capable of being beautiful in its own way, although these moments are fleeting. What adds to this weighty feeling of existing in a world this bleak is how terrifying many of the enemy designs are in Fallout 3. Many of the most common monsters you come across in the Capital Wasteland are the various types of feral ghouls, and on a first playthrough, when you don't know what to expect, there's a really good chance that these abominations will get you to jump out of your seat a good number of times.
I'm frightened, and I don't know what to do. I'm confused, and I want to go home.
The thing that gives them the capacity to be scary is that these guys are basically zombies. All feral ghouls that you come across throughout the game look like malnourished, rotting corpses that have become deformed beyond recognition. A detail I've always appreciated about them is that depending on the type of feral that you encounter, they might be wearing all kinds of things, from wastelander garb to mercenary gear, showing you that these bloodthirsty creatures used to be living, breathing people with their own stories that fell victim to the harsh, irradiated world that they inhabit. Bethesda utilized them really well in Fallout 3, because when you do come face to face with ferals, they're typically lurking around in dark buildings or the Capital Wasteland's numerous underground subway systems. A lot of times, if you find yourself in one of these areas, which will happen often, you can usually hear them snarling and making other zombie-like noises in the darkness, alerting you to their presence long before you've even set eyes on them. Unlike your traditional zombie though, feral ghouls are lightning quick and beeline in your direction at top speeds in an effort to rip you apart. Their characteristics combined are mainly what make feral ghouls scary, but if you take just a moment to think about it, it becomes clear how terrible of a fate becoming a feral ghoul is, as the radiation slowly strips away your humanity and you become nothing more than a mindless animal. Even the numerous non-feral ghoul characters that you can interact with around the Capital Wasteland don't look a whole lot better aside from still having their faculties in place. Due to the reputation that feral ghouls have earned for themselves among regular humans in the Fallout universe, non-feral ghouls have to deal with near constant racism and prejudices, even though they're still human beings on the inside like any other. It's obviously wrong to treat non-ferals this way, but it doesn't take too much thought to understand why they deal with this kind of behavior directed towards them. I mean, just look at these people. They look like they could lose their minds and become incredibly violent at the drop of a hat. As a matter of fact, this exact situation is the basis for one of the game's best quests, which we will get to, so put a pin in that for now. Another creature in Fallout 3 that has always stood out to me on account of it not only being a terrible fate as well as looking absolutely horrid are the centaurs. Centaurs are the result of multiple people being dipped into vats of FEV, making them fuse together into one entity. They are shorter than most creatures on account of them just being a human torso with human arms that function as legs, allowing them to slowly crawl along the floor. To make up for their slow movement speed, they're capable of spitting radioactive saliva at range, and if they are able to successfully close the gap on you, they'll attack with their 3 large tongues. These guys aren't as diverse as the ghouls are since they only have a single appearance, but they are disgusting creatures that are really creepy overall and are absolute nightmare fuel. What makes them more of a threat is that they're often seen hanging around super mutants, which don't fit the bill for being a scary enemy at all, but they will draw your attention away from the centaurs, allowing them to quietly close the gap on you. Following the trend of the more grotesque looking enemies, there is the Yaogwai, which is a species of bear that has seemingly become ghoulified.
Brother, what's that? What's that, brother?
They appear to be rotting, a lot like a ghoul would be, and their eyes lack any color at all, adding to their zombified appearance. Yaogwai are easily some of the most dangerous enemies to come across, as they have a good amount of health and can do a lot of damage as you'd expect a bear would. Though they are less common than the previous 2 examples, if they catch you off guard, they can very swiftly make a meal out of you. Before we move on to Fallout 3's gameplay, I just want to show one more monster design that shines the brightest of them all, and it's the Deathclaws.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Deathclaws are known to be the most dangerous creatures around the wasteland, and their appearance does a phenomenal job at representing this fact. They are one of the fastest enemies in the game and do a lot of damage with their attacks, as well as very often being much harder to kill than other monstrosities that you can come across. They tower over you, have long intimidating horns, sharp-ass teeth, and gigantic claws that will tear you to shreds with only a couple of strikes. Luckily, these creatures are some of the least common in the game, only being found in a few select portions of the map, but they are terrifying when you come across them for the first time, no matter if they are alone or in a group. These are only a handful of enemies that you can encounter in Fallout 3, but I use them as my examples because I feel like these are the creatures that best represent how their designs make the already dark and gritty tone even more weighty. They make the game feel as if there's going to be some disgustingly mutated, extremely dangerous threat around every corner, whether it be something as nasty as a ghoul or ferocious as the legendary Deathclaw. Bethesda did a 10 out of 10 job when it comes to the setting, the atmosphere, and how the art style complements the two. But there is one aspect of the game where it kinda doesn't really do as well, and it's the gameplay. To put it plainly, Fallout 3's gameplay is outdated as fuck. The biggest issue that the gameplay suffers from here isn't that it feels outdated playing it again in 2024, but that it felt outdated all the way back in 2008 when it was released. This becomes readily apparent after playing the game for only a short time, as the controls feel clunky and combat as a whole does not feel anywhere near as fluid as other titles from the same year and even before. Comparing Fallout 3's movement and combat mechanics to a title like Call of Duty World at War, which also came out in 2008, you can feel how far behind this aspect of the game is. Recently, I played Halo Combat Evolved, which was released way back in 2001, and even the gameplay in that title feels closer to the standards of the era than Fallout 3 does. That's a whole 7 years post-release of the game that set the standard for modern FPS controls, which is pretty wild when you compare the two. The jankiness of Bethesda combat can make being accurate when shooting more difficult, since your movements feel a bit stiff, and it also doesn't help that there are no iron sights in Fallout 3. Whenever you're in a gunfight and you aim down sights, it does the thing that old games used to do, where it just zooms in on the crosshair and your weapon becomes a bit more steady. Somehow, despite this, I still find the gameplay really satisfying, and I'm pretty sure that has something to do with V.A.T.S. When Bethesda was developing V.A.T.S, I have no doubt that it was implemented to be a unique mechanic that imitates the turn-based style of combat in the original games, which is awesome. But it was also clearly meant to be an aid, because combat itself lacks that fluidity that players had come to expect by 2008. Without V.A.T.S, I think the gameplay would be a lot more of a problem for this game, but because it's there and in itself is really fun to use, if you're ever struggling to get on target, it prevents you from being forced to use clunky mechanics during every second of combat, adding to some much needed variety. What makes it even better is that you very often get these sick shots of your character doing some pretty cool shit. In combination with Bethesda's buggy ass Gamebryo engine, you can even end up with some hilarious moments as well.
Don't come near me. Boom, right in the face. Holy fuck. Oh shit! Where's he going? Where's he go? Where's bro going? Oh damn. What the fuck?
Another aspect of the gameplay that keeps it feeling fun to play is how you progress and build your character. Unlike a lot of FPS titles out there, Fallout 3 is a game where everything has a specific skill and is completely statistics based. Want to become more accurate and do more damage with your laser gun? Dump a bunch of points into energy weapons. Want to make the most out of every healing item you come across? Level up that medicine skill. Trying to make your weapons degrade slower and even become better at fixing up your gear when it breaks? There's a repair skill for that. Is there a locked door in front of you that you can't get past without lockpicking or hacking a terminal? There are skills for that too. You get the point. If you can do it, there's a skill to improve your proficiency in it, but another thing that also boosts these skills are your special stats. The specials stand for Strength, Perception, Endurance, Charisma, Intelligence, Agility, and Luck. And all of them are important in their own ways to varying degrees depending on the skills you want your character to specialize in. Like, if you want to run energy weapons, you're gonna want a higher Perception stat, or a high Luck stat if you want your character to land high damage critical hits more often. All of the specials have their place, but out of all 7 of them though, none are anywhere near as powerful as the Charisma stat. For some reason, Bethesda designed the Charisma stat to essentially function like a difficulty slider. I remember starting my first playthrough and unknowingly pulling what I like to call the biggest big brain play possible by dumping all of my unassigned points into making both my intelligence and my charisma my highest special stats, and was totally unaware of how much that would come to my benefit in the very near future. When you're doing quests with a charisma stat as fat as Lizzo, you can talk just about anyone into just about anything, provided that the game presents you with a speech check for it. This makes quests insanely easy, as you can straight up skip quests, skip parts of quests, avoid combat, and persuade people to provide more information, and even negotiate higher rewards for doing things for people. If you don't put points into charisma, it makes the game more difficult, because you're going to encounter many situations that you could have otherwise changed the outcome of in more interesting ways than bloodshed. Oh, and caps are going to be much more scarce and a lot harder to come by.
You're broke! You're fucking poor!
When you take the skills and the specials and put them together, they both affect what perks you can choose as you level up. Without any DLC installed, the max level you can reach is 20, and every time you level up, you get to choose a perk. And let me say, I like most of the perks in this game, but there are a few here that are totally useless. For the first 3 levels, there are no perks available that are worth taking, because nearly all of them provide nothing more than a measly 5 additional skill points to specific skills, like Gun Nut, which applies to small guns and repair, or the Daddy's Boy perk, which gives you more points in medicine and science.
Boring.
That might sound like a good thing, but you get a fair amount of skill points to distribute as you level up, so it's kind of a waste to choose a perk that just gives you more of them. Until level 4, you only have 7 perks to choose from, 5 of which are the useless skill point perks. The other 2 are Lady Killer, a perk that lets you do 10% more damage to exclusively women, which I've personally never found a use for, and the other, which is Intense Training, that lets you level up any special stat of your choice. What I've come to find after multiple playthroughs of the game is that the only thing worth taking for the first 3 levels is Intense Training, because it provides a much bigger benefit to your character than any of the other options. When the max level in-game is 20, missing out on 3 perks kinda sucks, especially when you compare the poorly designed perks to many of the other amazing and useful ones, like Fast Metabolism that improves how much health stim packs give you by 20%, or Adamantium Skeleton, which makes your limbs 50% harder to cripple than normal. There are loads of essential perks that you want for your character, and in my opinion, a good perk is always going to offer you some sort of special attribute, making it preferable over a simple stat boost. Fortunately, the much better perks become available at level 4 and beyond, and in much larger quantities over time. After all, Fallout 3 is a role-playing game, so being able to build your character in a way that fits how you want to play is very important, and I think it's done well here. The game gives you just enough skill points within the 20 levels, but it also doesn't shower you with them, making the choice of which stat you put them into feel very important. When it comes to role-playing the type of character you want to be within the story, Bethesda introduced the karma system, which I used to like a lot, but over time I've come to realize just how pointless this mechanic really is. The karma mechanic is simple. When you do something good, Bethesda will shine down upon thee and call you a
good boy.
And when you do something bad, they go,
naughty, naughty.
Depending on whether you play a positive or negative karma character, you will commonly encounter mercenaries from either the Talon Company or regulators trying to collect a bounty on your head. The biggest effect that karma has on the overall game is that there are some companions that you can come across that demand you to be a certain level of good or evil if you want them to travel with you. Karma is also really easy to turn around as well. Like, you can slaughter an entire town to reach the most evil karma level possible, only to turn around and give a few purified bottles of water to a homeless man, and all of a sudden the game thinks you're a great person.
Today we are sending the local homeless man to space. Oh!
Although it doesn't change anything in the game for the worse, the presence of the karma system doesn't add too much to the game either, aside from these small aspects. For the most part, it only provides an illusion that your actions are having an effect on the world around you in smaller ways when they actually don't. The last and arguably most important aspect of Fallout 3's gameplay, and really all Bethesda titles, is how Bethesda are masters at making the worlds that they create fun to explore. When it comes to Bethesda titles, their games have this gameplay loop where you'll get a quest, and then on the way to the quest objective, you find some other interesting locations that are going to stop you in your tracks as you spend sometimes like 20 to 30 minutes just exploring a single location. Many of these locations are smaller in size with less notable loot, and many others are much larger in size and scope with interesting lore, great loot to find, and plenty of enemies to kill. One of my favorite locations is the Dunwich building in the bottom left corner of the map. As you approach, it just looks like an old office building, but once you enter, it turns out to be one of the most dangerous and creepy locations in the entire game. Right as you enter, the first thing you see is a skeleton laying on the ground between a couple of ammo boxes. This immediately sets the tone, as it communicates to you that just beyond this long-dead corpse, whatever killed this person lurks in the pitch black darkness. As you go around investigating the area, you will soon come across many feral ghouls that have obviously been locked inside of the building for a very long time. If you keep your eyes peeled for terminals, notes, and holotapes, you can learn 3 different stories of different groups of people that all met their end here in haunting ways. One storyline on a locked terminal tells you that a vast majority of the ghouls that inhabit the Dunwich building were employees that took shelter here when the bombs dropped, and the radiation eventually turned them into the monsters you now have to gun down. Another story, told on a series of easy-to-miss holotapes, tells the tale of a man named Jamie that is looking for his father, who set off to return a mysterious book to where it supposedly came from, the Dunwich building. As you find the tapes, you learn that Jamie finds his father as a feral ghoul as well as the book near a strange obelisk in the basement. Once you find the basement and the obelisk, Jamie is still there, living amongst the ferals as a non-feral ghoul, but he is hostile, so like the rest, you have to put him down. In one final tape, it is implied that Jamie was driven mad by the obelisk, and he chose to stay there and worship the strange structure until you eventually come across him. The final story of this location is told only in a single note found in a locked closet, accompanied by the skeleton of a man who locked himself inside. From this note, you learn that this man was a scavenger who just happened to walk into the wrong place looking for some good loot and ended up locking himself in the closet to hide from the overwhelming amount of ferals. Terrified, he holds out hope that a friend of his will be coming to provide backup, along with a supply of ammunition. The Dunwich building is a great example of a well-designed dungeon with interesting, easy-to-miss stories, and it's really fun to explore, especially since this is a great location loot-wise, where you can find a stat-boosting bobblehead among a few other things. A location you can find that rests just on the outskirts of downtown DC is the Nuka-Cola plant, and this is a location that is a bit light on exciting loot, but it still remains one of the most memorable to me for a couple of reasons. For one, this is the location where the Nuka-Cola company was producing and bottling the iconic glowing blue soft drink called Nuka-Cola Quantum that you find all over the Capital Wasteland. When you enter the building, it just looks like a regular decrepit old office building decorated with Nuka-Cola stuff. But as you head deeper, you find that sometime during the last 200 years, likely on the day that the bombs dropped, the Nuka-Cola Quantum that was being stored here has flooded the lower facilities. As a result of the ingredients that give Quantum its radioactive glow, every flooded room is lit up with the blue liquid, and it is here that an entirely unique Mirelurk species exists. These things are called Nuka-Lurks, and while they are similar to every other basic Mirelurk around the map, they do differ in aesthetic, as the isotopes from the radioactive soft drink have caused their hard shell exteriors to evolve and glow just like the soda does. In terms of loot and even lore, there isn't much to find here, but the unique enemies that are present, as well as the unique aesthetic of the facility, has made it a highly memorable location to me, and the Nuka-Cola plant is a place that I make sure to visit at least once during every playthrough. There are countless of examples that I can dive into of places that I love exploring even after playing the game as many times as I have, like the Deathclaw Sanctuary, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's just a huge den with a lot of Deathclaws. There's mutilated bodies everywhere, and it has some of the best loot in the game, like Vengeance, which is a unique Gatling laser and one of my personal favorite weapons in the entire game. There's Springvale Elementary School that is located just outside of Vault 101 that happens to have some really depressing lore and can be the first thing you ever explore. It's actually a great place to explore right at the start of the game because the raiders there are easy to take on at a low level, and by the end you can get yourself an assault rifle with plenty of ammo among other useful supplies. Just try to ignore the fact that the second you walk through the door, you are met with evidence that these raiders locked up a bunch of children in cages and brutally slaughtered them on account of the tiny skeletons and blood all over the walls. Obviously, I don't have many negative things to say about exploration in this game, but there is one common complaint I have heard people make over the years when it comes to exploration, and it involves how Fallout 3 forces you to traverse many underground metro tunnels to be able to access most parts of downtown DC. And while I don't entirely disagree, I don't fully agree either. The metro tunnels are often very samey, that much is a fact.
Accusations!
These are not accusations. This is
False accusations.
And
They're all super dark and have tons of ghouls, raiders, and other things that want to kill you, and they all look very similar to each other, so it can be very easy to get turned around when you're trying to traverse the world. Despite that though, I've always enjoyed wandering around underground looking for all the exits because it's very common to come across an entrance to the metro that you haven't found before. And then the next thing you know, you're in an entirely new and unexplored part of the city. There's some really well hidden areas that you have to stray from the beaten path to find, and discovering those new areas, even if small, feels really rewarding. An incredibly easy area to miss is the Tacoma Industrial, an old factory that is being used by super mutants as a base. When you arrive, they're battling against Talon Company mercs, and once the threats have been dealt with, further up ahead is a super mutant behemoth that you can either fight head on or call down an artillery strike to its location. Overall, what makes Fallout 3's gameplay as fun and as addicting as it is the combination of flawed yet fun gameplay, rewarding exploration, interesting lore to uncover, great loot to find damn near everywhere, and interesting locations that a majority of the time, aside from the metro tunnels, are entirely unique from one another. Fallout 3 does a great job at keeping you on your toes and keeping you filled with a sense of excitement and wonder at what you're going to discover next. When you take into account just how much praise I have been throwing at all of the things that we have discussed thus far, it shouldn't shock you too much to discover that I am also a really big fan of many of the stories that this game has to tell. In total, there are 18 side quests that are largely unconnected from the main story that are scattered all around the map, and what makes them stand out to me from most other games out there is the difficult decisions that you are forced to make in some of them. One of these side quests that is a very strong contender for one of the best quests in the whole game is the Replicated Man. This quest is given to you by an old scientist in Rivet City by the name of Dr. Zimmer, and he hires you to find any information on an incredibly advanced robot that has escaped his custody. If you press him to tell you more about this robot, he reveals that this mechanical being is not at all like the robots that are commonplace in the world. This robot apparently looks, speaks, and acts like a regular human being. In other words, a synthetic person. Dr. Zimmer also speaks of the Commonwealth and a mysterious community of scientists called the Institute, where they are in possession of possibly the most advanced technology the world has ever seen. In the search for information about this so-called synth, you learn that it is indeed real and was searching for someone to give it facial surgery to change its identity so it can hide in plain sight. After collecting enough clues, they point to a man named Pinkerton, who, when confronted with the evidence, will give access to his files. And it is here where you learn that the synth Dr. Zimmer is looking for is Harkness, the security chief of Rivet City, and also the very first person you ever speak to when you arrive there for the first time. His transformation into an entirely new person was a success, and he is in fact hiding in plain sight right under Zimmer's nose. The thing is, as a result of a memory wipe, Harkness has no idea who he really is. What makes this whole scenario even more interesting is that there is another organization that has caught wind of the investigation into the missing synth, and at some point, a woman named Victoria approaches you. She says that she is a member of another secret society known as the Railroad, whose goal is to help synths escape the Institute because she says the Institute is known to treat them as slaves. This is where the big question is presented. If an android can look, speak, act, and even feel emotions like any other human being, does that mean that they are people too? Do they deserve to have agency over their own lives even if they truly aren't human? Even though the original goal is to help Zimmer find the synth, the woman presents another option. She provides a component from a similar android and advises you to leave the synth be, to tell Zimmer that you did find the robot, but it was long dead by the time you found it. Although there are two main options for how to handle this predicament, there is an extra one that is not outright said that you can do, and it is to tell Harkness who he truly is. He doesn't believe you at first, but after using a recall command provided by Pinkerton, all of his memories from the Institute come rushing back to him. He remembers that he served the organization as a kind of hunter, going after many others that were once in the position he currently finds himself in. After countless missions of hunting his synthetic brethren and hearing them desperately try to fill his head with ideas of being in control of his own life, he began to question things and eventually went on the run. After reminding him of who he is, he plans to set out to kill Zimmer himself, but you can offer to do the honors for him. If you do, he hands over A321's plasma rifle, a unique plasma rifle that does more damage than any other in the game, as well as considering you his friend for protecting him. From here, the quest ends and you can go execute Zimmer, but what's cool is if you choose to go the route of killing him for Harkness, you can get a reward from Zimmer as well by telling him about Harkness, which makes you lose some karma, but you are rewarded with Institute technology that improves your chance to land a hit in V.A.T.S, which is really useful. To still get the good ending alongside both rewards, you then just kill Zimmer as was always intended. In the end, Harkness is safe and you get 2 great rewards. Probably the coolest part of this quest to me is that it directly ties into Fallout 4's main plotline, as that game takes place in the Commonwealth. The Institute are the main antagonists of the story, and the Railroad are present as well. It's just a shame that both of those factions ended up being so lame, because I love the way that Bethesda teased the main plot of Fallout 4 here years before the game came out. It's just brilliant. This is my favorite example of a side quest that puts a weighty question with some nuance in front of you, making it more of a difficult decision to make depending on how you personally evaluate the situation. Although there are some quests that have nuance to them, there are others where things are a lot more black and white, like the power of the atom. This is one of the first quests you can come across after entering Megaton at the start of the game, and it involves the town's most identifying feature, the gigantic undetonated nuke the town is built around. When you enter the town, the mayor and sheriff introduces himself to you, and you can ask him about the bomb. He says it's still a threat, but he doesn't trust anyone to deal with it. If you choose to take up the task yourself, you can either disarm it immediately if you have a high enough explosive skill, and if not, you have to wait on it until you do. But as you go about your business in the town, you can meet a man by the name of Mr. Burke. When you meet him, he tells you he was hired by Mr. Tenpenny at Tenpenny Tower to deal with the town, and suggests another option, rigging the bomb to blow. So literally, right out of the gate, you were given a quest with 2 black and white outcomes. You can commit genocide on a massive scale by nuking an entire town off the map, or you can not do that. While I do like the fact that they give you the option to either save a town or destroy it, the only reason you'd ever choose to destroy the town is just to be blatantly evil, or you'd only do it just to see how it plays out and then reload a previous save so you can then do the good thing. The reward for the quest either way is pretty good though, as you get a house to call your own in Megaton or Tenpenny Tower depending on the choice that you make. The difference is minimal, other than one basically being a slum compared to the luxury of Tenpenny Tower. I feel like because this quest lacks any nuance, most people will just save Megaton anyway because it's so clearly the right thing to do. Even more so because blowing up the bomb just locks you out of other side quests and other content that is in Megaton. It's a cool quest, and offers one of the biggest and best visual spectacles in Fallout 3, but ultimately it ends up being one that you don't think back on too much once it's been completed. It just doesn't provide any provocative thinking or decision making. A lot like this quest, there are others that don't provide much reason to think too hard about what you're gonna do, like Agatha's Song, which just involves you going through a few dungeons to find the location of a rare violin, so that way you can give it to an old woman in a shack in the middle of nowhere. You can sell it for a profit instead of giving it to her, but there isn't much reason to do that other than just wanting to be an asshole. The only real reward here is just making an old lady happy and giving her the ability to preserve a very old genre of music, which in itself is a cool concept for a quest, but it too lacks nuance. I want to be clear that just because a quest quote unquote lacks nuance doesn't mean that it isn't a fun quest with an interesting plotline. Other quests that I think are still great, even though they are more straightforward with moral questions, are Stealing Independence, where you hunt down the Declaration of Independence, Riley's Rangers, which is a rescue mission. There's the Head of State quest, where you help escaped slaves establish a beacon of hope for other slaves to turn to, all the while idolizing Abraham Lincoln in the process. In terms of this nuance that I keep bringing up, there is one quest that stands out to me from all of them, because for I believe the only time in the game, You are not the centerpiece of the plot. This quest is called Tenpenny Tower and has a lot to do with the themes of racism towards ghouls that we talked about before. When you discover the tower for the first time, just outside the gate is a ghoul named Roy Phillips, who is there as a representative for a small group of ghouls that want to move in. Speaking to a man on the other end of an intercom, Roy starts to get frustrated. The man on the other end, who turns out to be Security Chief Gustavo, doesn't like ghouls and would rather gun them down than be anywhere near them. This is a high-end settlement that is unlike anything else in the Capital Wasteland. So if you're a ghoul, you ain't getting in. As Roy walks away in anger, he warns Gustavo that they're going to get what's coming to them. After speaking to Gustavo and offering to handle the situation with the ghouls, you go to speak with them. Gustavo wants them dead, but after tracking down their hideout, you learn that Roy wants to use the metro tunnels to flood the settlement with ghouls in a deadly force takeover. Luckily, there is the possibility to broker peace between the ghouls and Tenpenny Tower, but in order to do so, you need to convince Mr. Tenpenny to change the rules. Turns out he isn't a total ghoul hater. If they've got the pay, he's more than willing to take their caps and let them live there as long as the other tenants agree to it. Well, if you have a fat charisma stat like I happen to during this quest, you can force the bigoted people in the tower to fuck off, and then the ghouls are allowed to move in. I was pretty stoked about that, honestly, because this is obviously the best outcome because the bigoted people are gone and everyone can live together peacefully. Well, when I would continue on with my adventures around DC doing all kinds of other things, I returned to Tenpenny Tower to find a suspicious lack of any regular human people. Going to talk to Roy, now living in Tenpenny's apartment, he tells me that he and Tenpenny just couldn't get along. So he murdered him in cold blood anyway, alongside all of the innocent people that lived here before. This was a really messed up but also awesome outcome because, like I said, I'm pretty sure this is the only quest where you don't get the outcome that you were promised. In the entirety of Fallout 3, every quest you do will provide the outcome that is promised to you. If you do the good thing, you get the good outcome. If you do the evil thing, you get the bad outcome. That's what makes the Tenpenny Tower quest unique. Even though there is this third option that is actually more difficult to pull off than just killing the ghouls that offers a positive outcome, it turns out that the best thing to do is kill the ghouls, because even though Roy's smaller number of followers are innocent, they won't be for long. You're forced to do something that isn't morally good to prevent the other outcomes that are much worse in comparison. Not only do people get unjustly murdered with this third, seemingly moral choice, but the behavior of the ghouls reinforces the stereotypes that made the people of Tenpenny Tower against the ghouls in the first place. Whoever wrote this quest, you, damn good job. It's so common when playing Fallout to get totally sidetracked from the main storyline simply because you're just doing so many fun side quests, and in Fallout 3, that's no different. Even though it is easy to stray from the main quest, the story that this game sets out to tell is pretty great as well, aside from a single baffling thing, which we'll get to. What makes the storyline so good is that, for one, it's a really simple premise that just fits the Capital Wasteland so well, as everything just revolves around drinking water. As I said at the start of the video, there is no civilization here because you can't find any body of water that isn't irradiated. Something I've always loved about Fallout 3's main story is that it starts off small in scale as we see the birth of the Lone Wanderer, and after choosing an appropriate name for your character,
that's a good name, don't you think? Fits you perfectly.
You see flashes of important moments in your life growing up inside Vault 101, where no one ever enters and no one ever leaves. As a baby, your dad, who for some reason is voiced by the one and only Liam Neeson, shows you Revelation 2:16. A Bible verse that is only a tease of what the story will eventually evolve into. We see the Lone Wanderer's 10th birthday, where he gets his iconic Pip-Boy. The day he takes the GOAT test to determine what job he's supposed to have for the rest of his life when he's 16. And at 19 years old, shit hits the fan. Your beloved father, Liam Neeson, has escaped the vault, and the tyrannical overseer is hunting you down because somehow you're responsible for it. After fighting for your life to escape, you are blinded by the light of the real sun, and as your eyes adjust, the Capital Wasteland greets you with open arms, and the adventure begins. I think this is a great moment because I've always felt that it's a highly immersive way to introduce the world to the player. Not only is this your first time seeing the Capital Wasteland as the player, but it's also the first time the Lone Wanderer has ever set foot outside of Vault 101, so the reaction you have to seeing the ruins of DC is the same as the main characters. For the entire first act of the game, there is one main objective: find Dad. This act of the game has you traveling all over the map and introducing you to many of the key locations in the story, like Megaton, Rivet City, and the Thomas Jefferson Memorial, which is the most important location in the narrative. In the search for Qui-Gon Jinn, you track him there, and what makes the memorial so important is that it has been converted into Project Purity, a massive undertaking of science with the goal of filtering irradiated water and making it 100% safe to drink. In other words, a chance for the Capital Wasteland to one day have a larger, flourishing civilization. The first act does focus on finding your dad primarily, but this is where the narrative starts to slowly up the ante. Like when you first get introduced to Sarah Lyons of the Brotherhood of Steel, and you get to see just a small slice of their operations. The part where you finally come face to face with Liam Neeson is a huge highlight of the game, because you find yourself in Vault 112, where the Overseer has taken over a computer-simulated neighborhood called Tranquility Lane that all of the Vault Dwellers live in. The thing is, he is in total control, and the Vault Dwellers think the simulation is their reality. Liam Neeson is also in the simulation, but he is being hidden from you by the Overseer, who plays the character of a sadistic little girl named Betty. For him to reveal Liam Neeson to you and let you both leave, you are forced to do terrible things to the Vault Dwellers for his entertainment, like brutally murder them in creative ways, and at one point he just gets bored and goes, "Fuck it. Go dress up as a serial killer and just obliterate everyone."
Yo, what the fuck? That was so fucked up, you guys.
This Overseer does some messed up stuff to these people who have no control over anything, and like I said before, the Vault Dwellers think that this simulation is reality. All aside from one old woman who approaches you and begs you to help them because she knows that none of this is real. Everyone else thinks she's crazy, but in reality, she's the only one who has any idea of what they're all being put through. She tells you about a terminal that can stop the whole thing, and this is where yet another of Fallout 3's big moral questions come into play. In an abandoned house, you can find a terminal with diary entries from the Overseer that explain just how long this has been going on. For 2 centuries, this deranged man has been taking these poor people to whatever kind of environment he likes for decades on end, and uses them for his entertainment by killing or torturing them, just to hit the reset button whenever he feels like it, and the Vault Dwellers remember nothing. In the terminal, there is also an option to end the simulation, but the caveat here is that since it's been 200 years, these people are only being kept alive by life support. If you flip the switch, the virtual suburban neighborhood is flooded by Chinese invaders set to kill every last resident of Tranquility Lane. If the residents are killed under this directive of the simulation, it ends their life support, and thus they will die. The dilemma here is that, again, most of these people don't know they're in a simulation, so to them, when the Overseer isn't murdering them, nothing is wrong. So does that mean that you have the right to put them out of their misery even if they don't know that they're suffering? While I do think someone can make the case that it wouldn't be right to cut the life support, I usually do, because even if they don't realize it, these people suffer a lot at the hands of a madman, so I see it as the right thing to do. As a plus for choosing to end the simulation, the Overseer is exempt from losing his life support, so you can avenge his victims by leaving him alone in the simulation for the rest of eternity. Throwing in a segment like Tranquility Lane was a great thing for the game overall, because it's not only a fun part to play through, but it also provides something entirely different from the rest of not only Fallout 3, but the rest of the series too. For me though, the best part of the story comes after you reunite with Liam Neeson, and as you get to work on firing up Project Purity, the scale of the story balloons when the big baddies of the Enclave show up to wreak havoc on the Jefferson Memorial. It comes out of nowhere just as you're going about doing various tasks for the science team, and it's an alarming moment when the Enclave swoops in on their vertibirds and infiltrates the facility. This is the first time you come across a technologically advanced enemy in the game, and from this point forward, there is a massive military force that has an interest in controlling Project Purity so they can control the people of the Capital Wasteland. What's cool about the Enclave appearing is that after this mission, you can find patrols and research stations scattered all around around the map, making the world even more dangerous now that there are power armor-clad soldiers out there that will attack you on sight. Once they've overrun Project Purity and you escape with most of the science team, you finally get to see the scale of the Brotherhood operations, as you get access to their headquarters at the Citadel, which was once known as the Pentagon. Really quick, I just want to take a moment to go over both the Brotherhood and the Enclave now that they've both been brought up. There are a lot of people out there that don't like the Brotherhood in Fallout 3 because they are vastly different from the Brotherhood in Fallout 1 and 2, but personally, I don't see any problem with how they're portrayed here for a couple of reasons. The Brotherhood in Fallout 3 are a very noble organization because they've chosen to step away from what is expected of them, which is to collect and protect any important technology from anyone else who would use it to harm the rest of mankind, and instead have taken to directly protecting mankind from the super mutant threat that infests the DC ruins. I think foregoing the original and long-standing goals of your entire organization simply because you are the only people that have the capability to stand up to the threats that oppress other survivors is very respectable. So in Fallout 3, I like that they've just straight up become the good guys. The other reason I like this change in the Brotherhood is that they are given some depth, because there is a branch of the Brotherhood of Steel in DC that split off from the Eastern chapter because they feel that the Brotherhood should be searching for technology rather than helping the locals. They call themselves the Brotherhood Outcasts, and they look way cooler than the regular Brotherhood on account of their black and red armor, but because they're a lot like traditional Brotherhood, a lot of them are assholes to anyone outside of their ranks. They don't engage with you much outside of trading tech for stim packs or ammo and things like that, which is a useful thing to know if you're low on health items. Also, I happened to notice when getting footage for this video that you actually don't lose any karma for killing them, so make of that what you will. I decided to shoot up their whole base on account of their assholery. In terms of the Enclave as the antagonists, this game unfortunately doesn't build on their lore too much from Fallout 2 when they first appeared in the series. At one point, you get captured and you get an extensive look inside their base in the Capital Wasteland, which is pretty neat. This is definitely one of the best parts of the game for me because you can get your hands on a lot of great armor and weapons as well as a bobblehead. Plus, Enclave technology is just really unique looking with all of their blue LED lights they love to use, making their base stand out visually from the rest of the game, ultimately making it more fun to explore. The main thing that is different between the Enclave and Fallout 2 and 3 is that instead of wanting to commit genocide by infecting the world with FEV and killing every mutant in the wasteland, they seem to want to actually improve the wasteland, albeit under their fascist control. At least everyone aside from the leader himself, who does actually want to commit genocide by infecting the water. So you were forced to take an FEV vial, so later you can be given yet another choice that pretty much boils down to committing genocide or not committing genocide. A lot like setting off the nuke, there isn't much reason to do that aside from being evil because you want to. Even though the Enclave hasn't changed very much, if at all, from Fallout 2, I still find myself really liking them as the antagonists because they're basically Nazis. I mean, come on, who doesn't like killing Nazis and putting a stop to their horrible plans? They've even got the menacing yet sick-looking drip down to a T.
So good and tasty?
The last thing that I want to talk about in regards to the story is the baffling part, and unfortunately, it's the ending. I have never seen a game that is so good in so many ways, including the story, have an ending that is so good and yet so terrible at the same time like Fallout 3's is. As it turns out, the thing that is the key to getting Project Purity working is a GECK, which is like this magical device that is designed to help Vault Dwellers re-establish civilization, and the only one in the Capital Wasteland is present in Vault 87. After gaining access to Vault 87, you come across an educated and non-violent super mutant by the name of Fox that has been locked up in a cell for God knows how long by his less intelligent and extremely hostile mutant brothers. He tells you that the GECK is inaccessible to you because the area where it's being stored is dangerously irradiated, but if you release him, he'll get it for you because he, as a super mutant, is resistant to any and all radiation. It literally cannot harm him whatsoever. At this point, you part ways until you get captured by the Enclave, which he witnesses with his own eyes. As you escape their base, you run into him just outside, and he says that he knows no one else in the wasteland, so since you saved his life, he set out to save save yours, but showed up just a little too late. From here, he can be your companion, and you can take him as your companion to the final mission where you reunite with the Brotherhood and fight your way to Project Purity in an epic segment where you follow Liberty Prime, this massive mini-nuke throwing robot, as he decimates Enclave defenses on the way to Jefferson Memorial. Once you get there and make your way inside, Fox will fight alongside you all the way to the heart of Project Purity, and then disaster strikes. Due to the damage that the facility took during the battle, the entire memorial is under threat of exploding in a giant ball of fire unless someone takes a step into the purifier to activate it. The problem is, once the purifier is activated, the room will be flooded with deadly levels of radiation, and whoever goes in will not be coming back out. Luckily for the player, Fox is conveniently immune to radiation and is looking for an opportunity to repay his debt to you for saving his life back in Vault 87. If you have him with you at this moment, there is a dialogue option to ask him to enter the purifier, meaning nobody has to die right now. But when you ask him to go in for you, he says,
I'm sorry, my companion, but no. We all have our own destinies, and yours culminates here.
Hey, yo, what the fuck?
This has never made sense to me. This is such an easy writing screw up to avoid. It is baffling to me that this was not caught in development, and if somehow it was and the choice was made to just leave it in that way, that's pure stupidity. Todd Howard even claimed that this game had 200 endings before release.
Have the number of endings in this game been finalized? When you again, it was I think the number tossed around was somewhere around a dozen last year when you were first starting to talk about it. So how's that coming along, that part of the project?
Being that we are Bethesda, everything gets a bit big, so as of last week, we're over 200 endings.
So it doesn't make a goddamn lick of sense why this was the one that they chose to go with. If super mutants weren't immune to radiation or Fox didn't exist, then it wouldn't be a problem at all. But because they had just set up Fox as a character not long before the end, it just seems like a massive writing screw up that is very hard to ignore. Bethesda was straight up sprinting with how well the story was going so far, and then right at the finish line they just tripped and face planted right into the concrete. So in the end, you either end up sacrificing yourself, in which you are praised as a hero for doing so by Ron Perlman in the ending cutscene, or you make the Brotherhood lose one of their best leaders by asking Sarah to go in instead, and then in the end, Ron Perlman will just talk shit on you. Or you could just do nothing and let the building explode. Either way, you're pigeonholed into somebody dying needlessly when the simple solution is literally staring you right in the face. If you put the god-awful ending aside, the rest of the game is really damn good, which is why, despite the ending being as poorly written as it is, I don't think it negatively affects the overall experience too much. If only Bethesda had released a DLC or something like that to attempt to fix the shit ending. Oh, that's right, they did, but we're going to cover all the DLC expansions in a dedicated follow-up video. I think it's safe to say that, as a whole, even with all of its flaws, I still love Fallout 3. Very much. I still enjoy getting immersed in it whenever I sit down to play it because it's just a great game. And now that I've finally covered the base game here on the channel, I can move on to the DLC expansions and eventually the holy grail of the series, Fallout New Vegas. Keep in mind, I have also already covered Fallout 4 as well as its DLC, so if you're interested in that, I will leave the link to those videos down in the description. So what do you think about Fallout 3? Is there anything that I said in this video that you agree or disagree with? Feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. I swear I do my best to read and respond to as many as I possibly can. I hope that you all enjoyed the video, and if you did, go ahead and click that subscribe button so that way you could stick around. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you all taking the time out of your day to give this video a watch. Stay tuned for the DLC video, and I will catch you guys later.